Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And it's a big one you've all been waiting for. The new album from Lil Wayne, The Carter 5. I don't think anyone can deny at this point the hype behind this album has long eclipsed any impact it could ever make. And when I say that, I'm referring to artistic impact in the same way that Lil Wayne drove the conversation a decade ago. Because the sales, the streaming numbers mean in terms of popular impact, looks like Lil Wayne still has it. But I think even Lil Wayne fans grasp this, because I know even a fair few of them considered the possibility that this release, it was a pipe dream. The sort of project that remained shelved or unreleased to become the stuff of legends of what might have been, especially when it came to Lil Wayne's stifled career over the past 5 years. But beyond that possibility, the largely unasked question, namely whether the Carter 5 should be released at all, that's a much dicier one. Folks forget that while his commercial clout was undeniable, Lil Wayne hadn't exactly been on a hot streak of quality in the 2010s. Between album concepts that felt unrealized or the very least uneven, and Lil Wayne himself struggling as both an MC and a songwriter across mixtapes, albums, and even guest appearances, despite his undeniable influence, his star had fallen hard and fast. And with the Carter 5 developed in that environment, I don't even want to think it would be reasonable to expect a return to the glory days of the Carter 2 or the Carter 3. At best, I expected another overlong, messy project that can nail a few more hits than misses that would give better than expected reviews thanks to a largely relieved fan base. And thus, with all that in mind, with my expectations safely lowered, did the Carter 5 deliver? Well, here's the thing. I don't think this album is bad or mediocre. In fact, I'd probably say it's one of the best projects Lil Wayne has put out in years, mixtapes or otherwise. It's better than that Free Wheezy album that I probably overpraised. Hell, I'd probably say, more to the point, it's one of the first projects in years that's reminded me of the few reasons why I kind of used to like Lil Wayne. I've never really been a fan of the guy, but there have been cuts and albums that I've genuinely liked from him, with my favorite being the Carter 2. Yes, I'm one of those fans. And there are moments of genuine greatness where Lil Wayne and his collaborators absolutely knock it out of the park. They sound really damn great, but that's the issue. They're moments, and that's arguably the biggest reason why I've seriously struggled with getting on board with Lil Wayne as a whole and the Carter 5 in specific, because there are issues here that have been endemic to his entire career. The project's way too long with an ocean of filler cuts, the guest performances are increasingly slapdash, the production's all over the place, and even Lil Wayne doesn't always consistently deliver. Again, it's probably the best project he's put out since the Carter 3, but I'm also rapidly coming to realize that album only worked because there were so many ideas stuffed in from his most prolific era and quality, and when you can't match that, it's not going to be as good. And look, you might all know this. Hell, if you're a Lil Wayne fan, nothing I'm saying here is all that new. You know all his projects run long on the principle that in the excess enough good ideas will shine through. And to me, that's a real shame. Knowing when to cut things down and sequence good ideas or just edit down good ideas, that's a skill I wish Lil Wayne possessed, because there are enough good to great songs here to make a pretty damn solid album if you get rid of all the filler, open up with Swiss beats and Uproar, sending a knife straight to my mid-2000s nostalgia center in my brain after the introduction from his mother. It would honestly give the project a shot of momentum to push through. Nicki Minaj not rapping, Travis Scott contributing a rodeo leftover with a pretty ferocious verse from Lil Wayne, and a really grating chipmunk hook on Can't Be Broken. So maybe include Dedicate at some point to hammer home how much Lil Wayne has influenced the current generation. But even then, a more sober and quasi-responsible rapper would acknowledge that his legacy is mixed, to say the least, especially when it comes to the drugs. But it's also hard to deny that even for artists who have surpassed Lil Wayne like Kendrick Lamar, that the influence isn't there. And I'll say this, when Lil Wayne is trying, he is leaps and bounds a more creative and dynamic rapper than so many of his offspring in the mainstream in terms of delivery and wordplay. Yes, the auto-tune abuse is still somewhat there. What About Me utterly killed the momentum coming out of the album highlight Mona Lisa with Kendrick, and then you might as well tack on a few other songs that just have a little bit too much auto-tune crooning, but it's been turned back just enough to show that when he's trying, Lil Wayne can flow his ass off. The only reason that Let It Fly is interesting at all is Lil Wayne's closing verse, and even if Open Letter takes half the song to get there and get a little bit more visceral, he does get there, as well as on Mess. It sounds really good. But this leads to the second major issue. a serious lack of focus. I get that Lil Wayne's probably been working on this album for years at this point, and it's helped me excuse some of the production that was likely paid for and put together in 2014, Open Safe from DJ Mustard being the most glaring example. But there are a number of cuts where the production sounds a bit dated, and the mixing and mastering seems oddly sloppy, especially for an album with this long development time. And I honestly wouldn't mind the older cuts that sound a little bit more dated, like the soul samples Driving Demon or Dope New Gospel, or when he picks up a washed out guitar sample on Mess, or even an old Manny Fresh beat like on Perfect Strangers, or Start This Shit Off Right with Ashanti and Mac Main. But Lil Wayne, if he was doing that, he wouldn't have tried to tack on Used To, which many have considered a series of subliminal shots at Pusha T to continue on with a Drake beef, or Don't Cry, where he sampled XXXTentacion posthumously for the hook, which, okay, you know, it's more tolerable than what they did with Lil Peep and Falling Down, but it also reminds me that I never liked XXXTentacion's singing, especially when this was not intended for this album. But this lack of focus also translates to the guest stars. You get Snoop Dogg and Nicki Minaj, and you only use them singing or on hooks. You have Ashanti, but you limit her role even more. The one rapper who's given considerable billing, outside of Travis Scott being Travis, is Kendrick Lamar on Mona Lisa opposite those big, dark, gothic pianos. And even there, he's playing the jealous and obsessed fan of Lil Wayne more than anything else. Now, granted, that's not all that surprising, given how much of this album seems to eventually circle back around Lil Wayne trying to take a conscious look at his fame and impact nowadays in 2018. But the bizarre thing is that it's not really territory that Lil Wayne hasn't covered before in some way, and the areas that might reflect a darker, more sobering reality that might demand introspection, they sadly don't get a lot of attention. You'd think Don't Cry would start to show some of this with a question about humility, but by the time we get into the final third of the album, Lil Wayne is staring into the mirror and still calling himself the greatest rapper alive. Admittedly, he's got a better claim to fame on this album than most of the 2010s, but still, no. And while he does admit the mess of women and family that circles around him, it's nearly always circling back to gold diggers and bitches, and while this record isn't quite as debauched as I'm Not a Human Being Part 2, it can occasionally feel just about as sour, especially around women. That has not changed. And that's the weird thing about the mood of this album. If it wants to celebrate the long overdue rebirth of Lil Wayne, not rebirth the album, just hold your horses, it loses momentum really fast. And with the lumbering beats and the murky keys, it doesn't feel as fun as it should. But if it wants to seriously reckon with the legacy of Lil Wayne's fame and success, which if you dig between the lines, there's a fair few songs at least trying to approach this. If he's being self-critical, it's very surface level, and you know what, that kind of makes sense. People tend to forget that Lil Wayne's been in the entertainment industry and successful since the Hot Boys, since the late 90s, and he might not have perspective outside of his own experience to see more and truly break outside his bubble, even with this much time off, which might explain why this record has snippets trying to get at his angst, but they're not structured in a way to pay off all that well. Interspersed between snippets of flexing and increasingly lazy tracks with him rhyming words at themselves with the same bitches and guns flexing that he's fallen towards time and time again. It's rarely bad because there are far less outright terrible lines and shit puns, but they do get forgettable. That's all I'm saying. Now, the one big exception is the closing track, Let It All Work Out, where he actually admits in full that the gun accident where he shot himself at the age of 12 was in reality a suicide attempt, which he's mentioned before on Solange's Mad a couple years back, but here he confirms it. It's a great song with a great sample, great powerful way to close out the album, but even it doesn't quite feel like it completely caps off the more personal, introspective narrative in between the lines, and I feel like we should have gotten more of, providing that's even what Lil Wayne even wants with this album. And that's what it is, the Carter 5. And really, what I can say about it, it's a Lil Wayne album. Probably one of his better ones in terms of the consistency of his rapping, if nothing else, but it's got all the same unfocused slapdash issues I've had with Lil Wayne albums for years now. But if this is the album intended to put Lil Wayne back on the throne, I'm not quite sure it gets there. Yeah, Lil Wayne is back and coherent and seemingly sober and rapping better than ever, but it doesn't really show he has more to say or reveal beyond glimmers of deeper potential that still haven't quite been tapped, which sure is promising, and maybe those are coming, and this is a long overdue book that he has to close on a part of his career more than an audience that wants to see him push boundaries, which is where I'm at. And again, I don't think this could have ever possibly lived up to the hype. So with all that in mind, solid 6 out of 10. It's recommended for the fans. Check it out for the choice cuts, otherwise I'll have to cover it all in Billboard Breakdown anyway. And as for whether this is Lil Wayne's final album, as he said in the past, well, again, he said it would be. But knowing him, I don't think we've heard nearly the last of Lil Wayne. At least not yet. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I think Lil Wayne fans at this point are sane enough not to go totally crazy with the poll, but there you go. Have fun with it. And if you want to buy or stream the record, links down there below. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to actually get involved in supporting this channel or help put albums on my schedule, link to my Patreon's right over there. Or 3 times a week, you guys get to vote for my schedule. And once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. If you want to see my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.